Hello everyone, SpongeBob here, and welcome to a new Top 10 list. Now some of you might know, or maybe not know, is that I have an enjoyment for watching SpongeBob SquarePants. Despite the show still running, and in its 10th season, you can't deny that in its prime, it was a big deal. With fun characters, funny animation, relatable stories, great music, and a nice likability to it, SpongeBob is a pretty enjoyable and often funny show. And even though it's still on, many of the show's episodes have their own way of making us laugh, cry, or even get into. And that's what I'll be going over today, for I'm going over a top 10 list of my top 10 favorite SpongeBob episodes. Number 10. Patty Hype. If culinary art TV shows have taught us anything, it's that making new food is hard to please the professional chef, or even customer or food critic. But in this episode, even though it never mentions how the food is done, is a fun one. With the Krusty Krab not gaining any customers, SpongeBob has an idea, by selling Krabby Patties in different colors which he calls Pretty Patties. Yet Mr. Krabs and Squidward think the idea is too silly, and so SpongeBob sells them outside his house with Patrick. And the Pretty Patties become such a success that Mr. Krabs decides to take over his employee's fame. Seeing SpongeBob create his own food and have it be a hit is admirable, and the many colors of the Pretty Patties are colorful and might have fine designs. But even when Mr. Krabs takes over, the customer's reaction to the food's side effects is fun. And at least SpongeBob isn't there to witness it, or wasn't even aware of what would happen even though he himself made them. Full of silly expressions, funny visuals, nice gags, and a likable feel, this shows how a silly idea can really become a big hit. Number 9. Squeaky Boots. Everyone has something they love and can't stop doing what they love because they love it too much. But very few times it would lead other people to go insane just for how long one's obsession goes, and this one does it pretty well. Mr. Krabs has bought a pair of boots for her daughter Pearl on her birthday, but she rejects them and Mr. Krabs hands them to SpongeBob, claiming they're fry cook boots for the best fry cook. But SpongeBob gets so used to wearing the boots, even to letting the squeaks do the talking, that the very sound of them really upsets Mr. Krabs, to the point of hiding them away. While the climax of the episode does parody the ending of the Telltale Heart, every single expression Mr. Krabs makes throughout the episode is very funny to watch, even for a first season episode. And all the squeaking of the boots, though annoying to some, is actually kind of fun. The many ways SpongeBob uses the boots and the squeaks they make are silly, but it's pulled off well. And when SpongeBob becomes sad when the boots go missing, it's kind of sad as well, like the many times SpongeBob becomes upset. With nice sound effects, funny expressions, and a great climax, it's hard to ignore such a fun little episode, and this one is fitting enough. Number 8. Suds. This was the first episode I remember seeing, and it's not a bad episode to start off with. Even though it's recommended or required to see the show from the very start, yet the first season DVD is missing the very first episode where SpongeBob gets his job. Either way, this is how I got into it. SpongeBob has a midnight snack and falls asleep, only to have the refrigerator door open overnight, freezing his entire house and giving him an illness called the suds. With calling Sandy about his cold, she says she'll take him to the doctor, but Patrick warns SpongeBob about the dangers of doctors. So SpongeBob lets Patrick work on getting him better as Sandy still insists on taking him to the doctor. The idea of visiting the doctor as being scary has been done before, but the ways Patrick tries to help, while good intentions, don't really work, yet they turn out fun in their execution. And it's fun to see how SpongeBob becomes cured of his illness and funny when Patrick tries to get the same treatment. It's all enjoyable from the first time I saw it, and it's still enjoyable today. And it really makes for a decent first-time episode with fun visuals and a nice story. It's an episode that would leave anyone feeling better. Number 7. Graveyard Shift. There have been several episodes dealing with fear and paranoia, but this one, in my opinion, has it down quite nicely, and it makes for an enjoyable episode. Mr. Krabs decides to let the Krusty Krab open for 24 hours a day for those late-night customers. Yet SpongeBob, despite loving to work at night, is afraid of going outside at night. Which gets Squidward to tell the story of the hash-slinging slasher, an old fry cook with a spatula for a hand, and the signs of his coming. This scares SpongeBob only to have Squidward say it's not true, but Squidward's story ends up coming to life as he and SpongeBob continue to work their shift. For an episode that has some fun moments, there are times when it could be scary, but not on the dark side, but on the light side, as how horror comedies are done, but they're funny in how they treat the scare moments, yet this one's more kid-friendly. And when everything's revealed, it makes for a decent conclusion. With all the cliches of horror stories thrown in, and the character expressions as well, the episode overall is a fun treat, one to watch every Halloween, or for a funny scare. Number 6. Bubble Stand. There are episodes of SpongeBob that have a certain way of telling stories. Some deal with facing a problem that needs to be resolved, some deal with a conflict that needs to end, some deal with the insanity of a dilemma, and some are just to show some fun involved. And this is one of them. SpongeBob sets a stand outside his house to have anyone blow a bubble for 25 cents, and give lessons for the same price. But only Patrick gets to do so, and Squidward just plays his clarinet. But while SpongeBob shows Patrick his bubble blowing technique, which involves lots of noise making, Squidward tells SpongeBob and Patrick to stop blowing bubbles, yet he himself is curious why and how it's done. It's interesting to see the many bubble shapes SpongeBob makes, as well as seeing how he teaches his own technique on blowing a bubble, to the point of getting Squidward mad and maybe go crazy when doing it. It all happens within one location, shows all the fun there is to be, and is all pretty simple in its approach. What else can I say? It's just a good and charming little episode, and there's no bubbles to burst around this one. Number 5. Just One Bite. We all had to try new things, and once we do, we either get hooked onto it or not. And this one does demonstrate that idea, with our eyes being bigger than our stomach, yet took it pretty far that makes it both sad and funny. Squidward has a hatred for Krabby Patties, even though he never ate one, and after many attempts by SpongeBob to try to taste just one, Squidward took one tiny bite and claims that he hates it. But Squidward loves the taste so much that he tries to get his hands on another one, yet SpongeBob still thinks he hates them. What makes the episode good is, well, not really that, but Squidward's attempt to eat another Krabby Patty. It's both sad and funny seeing him go through all this and never get a single one, and the addiction he has for it is very big and somewhat extreme that he would wound up in something like this. For something that's both touching and hilarious in a silly way, it manages to bring a smile on my face. And this goes to show that nobody will ever go hungry again. Number 4. Procrastination. Much like Just One Bite, here's another episode that everyone can relate to and have done so, yet this one goes a little further than we expect. The students of boating school are assigned to do an essay as homework on what not to do at a red light in exactly 800 words, and to be due the next day. Well, SpongeBob started to do his essay, but finds it hard to come up with what to say, so hard that he spends more time doing other things than his homework. And that's basically it, but it's also very relatable. Doing an 800-word essay for homework is hard, but at the same time it's easy when knowing the subject of it. And the subject for this episode is pretty easy to get most of it. But the way SpongeBob handles it is what makes the episode engaging. The constant distractions that goes on are relatable, the situations that happen are easy to get, and it's all around enjoyable, with a crazy sequence near the end that's pretty unexpected. Full of silly out-of-nowhere moments, it's a fun, simple, and delightful episode. It's where avoiding homework is more fun to watch, even if you try to get back to it. Number 3. Clams. While the show has made references to TV shows and sometimes literature, there's not many for movie references, as from what I saw. Well, with Nickelodeon's other show, Jimmy Neutron, having to do an episode around the movie Jaws, SpongeBob took its shot at parodying the film, and it does pay off. When the Krusty Krab receives its $1 millionth from a customer, Mr. Krabs takes SpongeBob and Squidward out for clam fishing as a treat. Of course, Squidward doesn't partake in it, but SpongeBob does, which leads him to accidentally using the $1 millionth bill as bait. But that attracts a giant clam which eats the dollar and swims away, so Mr. Krabs tells Squidward and SpongeBob to hunt down the clam to get his dollar back. It's nice to see a movie parody in the show as they are rare or very few, but this one's a funny episode, with stock footage of an orchestra, a variation on the Jaws theme, fun visuals, and Mr. Krabs' various expressions from going crazy to crying in different ways, which becomes a staple for other crying scenes of SpongeBob. It's a lovely send-up filled with funny scenarios that are very enjoyable. What else is there not to like of it? Number 2. Wet painters. There are times when you're told to do one thing and not mess it up, whether it be for a friend, yourself, or a family member. But this episode takes that idea and turns it into one of the funniest episodes of the show. SpongeBob and Patrick are assigned to paint the inside of Mr. Krabs' house, but the catch is not to get the paint on anything, because it's permanent, even though his walls are full of stuff. Well, the two get the paint in all the right places, except that they got a dab of it on Mr. Krabs' first dollar bill. So the two try to get the paint off the dollar before Mr. Krabs comes back. Almost every gag, both visual and verbal, do hit the right spots. The many attempts to clean the paint off the dollar, Patrick's misunderstanding of a bad situation, and various objects coming from nowhere for a good laugh. And by the time Mr. Krabs reveals how to remove the paint, it angers SpongeBob and Patrick to when Mr. Krabs was just, well, joking about it. All concluding with a fine pun from Mr. Krabs. Full of funny dialogue, funny reaction, nice visuals, and you have a funny episode that's more enjoyable than watching paint dry. And my number 1 favorite SpongeBob episode is Krusty Krab training video. Yeah, this one does air alongside Wet Painters, but both make for a fun half hour. And this episode is a good way to top it off. It's basically a training video for the Krusty Krab, showing how to clean up for work, how ordering food is done, and how to keep things under control and organized. It does also present a backstory on how the restaurant came to be, yet everything about this episode is pretty funny. It doesn't have to be a full narrative, have big conflicts, or have a problem to be solved. It's just a simple instructional video, and all of it works for a couple of reasons. One is the setup. It is shown as a basic how-to with interviews with the crew, showing the behind-the-scenes look, and presented in a style somewhat similar to instructional videos, as well as show stuff that normal training videos would never do. Second is the narration, which is the biggest highlight of the episode. Yes, he speaks with one tone, but the way he uses it is both kind of funny and sometimes dry, and it's more fun when seeing the character's reaction to the narration, and the narrator trying to keep the video alive by either keeping up with something or constantly going. With all this bizarre mixture thrown in, and many funny visuals and verbals, Krusty Krab training video is a delightful and very funny episode, making it my number 1 favorite SpongeBob episode. And that is it. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Facebook or Twitter, support me on Patreon, and tune in next week for a new video.